What up, Pittsburgh Steelers fans? Matty P here with another episode of Steelers War Room. Well, the Steelers have had a successful draft. Now comes May 2nd, coming up in just 24, 36, 48 hours, depending on when you're listening to this, depending on where you're listening to this. May 2nd is the deadline for the 5th-year options. It's widely expected they're not going to go with Justin Fields as 5th-year option. But Najee Harris could be a different story. And that's the focus of what we're going to talk about in this episode of Steelers War Room. All right, now it's important for Najee Harris to stay with the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers are building a bully ball game. We saw that this draft with the additions of Troy Fautanu, Zach Frazier, Mason McCormick, even though McCormick is more of a 2025 and beyond prospect. We also know this from Broderick Jones signing last year, along in the draft, and along with the acquisition of Isaac Seumalo last year as well. And when Mike Tomlin was asked about what he's doing up front, he said this to Daniel Jeremiah on draft weekend.
We just want to roll people, man, to be honest with you guys. You know, we got some backs that we like.
Now, we hear that. We got backs that we like. Najee Harris, Jalen Warren. Jalen Warren is on contract. This is his 3rd year out of the 4. And then, obviously, Najee Harris, this is his 4th year, 4th season. And then, of course, the 5th-year option for next year needs to be considered on May the 2nd. So what would it cost to keep Najee? Now, it is going to cost the Steelers to keep Najee a total of, when you look at the 5th-year options, of $6,790,000 minimum. That's what it costs him. Fully guaranteed. So if they cut him, he gets paid that in full. Not my choice. If I'm going to be brutally honest, it's not really where I think the Steelers should be doing. I think the Steelers should be looking to decline the 5th-year option as part of a 2 to 3 year, probably 2 to be safe, extension. Somewhere in the realms of about $5 million a year, with $1.5 in incentives, whether that's, maybe it's a $500,000 roster bonus and it's $1 million for hitting over, let's say, 1,100 yards. And the Steelers making the playoffs, you could do that as $500,000 instead of a roster bonus. Probably he doesn't deserve to get more like $6 million and then the incentives, but somewhere between 5 and 6, 5.8, 5.75, whatever it is, you'd be happy. That's what I think they should do. But how does that make sense with some of the other contracts that have been given recently around the league? Well, let's go to some of the other top running backs in the league. Now, Christian McCaffrey is getting an average pay per year of $16 million. Christian McCaffrey is a true dual threat running back. The best running back in the game, pretty much arguably the top 3, and a dual threat wide receiver. He is Le'Veon Bell 2.0 for the 49ers, right? Obviously, we had Lev Bell, but he does the Lev Bell role when Lev Bell was with us. Then you got Alvin Kamara, very similar, but definitely always been much more of a pass catcher than some of the other running backs in terms of being dual threat. Jonathan Taylor is definitely up there. Obviously, a fantastic running back, can still catch the football, but more of a traditional running back than he is receiver. Saquon Barkley is just a magician in the backfield, and he got a decent deal, average pay per year. But again, he only got a 3-year deal. And again, probably considered in a tier above Najee Harris. Then you got Josh Jacobs, $12 million average pay per year. Joe Mixon, $9.875 million average pay per year. He's on a 2-year contract. Devontae Swift on $8 million a year, Derrick Henry on $8 million, Tony Pollard on $7.25, Aaron Jones on $7 million, James Conner on $7 million, Miles Sanders on $6.35 million, David Montgomery on $6 million, Devin Singletary on $5 million. Now, that's kind of interesting when you look at these running backs. James Conner is probably and Aaron Jones where I feel comparable with Najee Harris. Najee Harris, 6.75 does look good against that value. But Najee Harris could be competing in next year for a contract if he once he played through the 5th-year option, where this number doesn't really change, which is why he'd be better off signing a multi-year deal with the Steelers. However, if the Steelers are going to get him on, let's call it $6 million plus 1 to 1.5 in incentives to bring him to 7.5 because of his production so far. And not being a dual threat at running back in terms of receiving and rushing the football. The guaranteed money is going to be really important. But I want to pause there. Let's look at some results. Now, Christian McCaffrey last year, the most yards in the league at running back, 1,459. Derrick Henry with 1167. Kyron Williams of the LA Rams, rookie, 1144. James Cook, 1122 with Buffalo. He had a really good end to the second half of the season. Devondre Sweat, I said it again, Devondre Swift, 1049. James Conner, 1040. Najee Harris, 1035 yards. Yeah, now Najee's sharing the rock with Jaylen Warren, and that's something to factor in. I went through all those running backs. Some of those running backs do not have a bona fide number 2 or 1B or a 2A running back on that roster. Najee Harris does compete with that, with Jaylen Warren on the roster. You look at TDs produced. Najee Harris goes from 7th in the league in yards, by 1 yard ahead of Joe Mixon, to like when you rush for 8 touchdowns and becomes 13th ranked. I also judge running backs on first downs because this is about sustaining drives, particularly at the end of the game. And this is where Najee Harris is ranked 15th. Now, admittedly, he'd been ranked equal at 12th, 13th, 14th, one of those spots with 53, according to Pro Football Reference. With another 6, or let's say another 8, he'd be in the top. He'd be in anything. He just would be just outside the top 5. So Najee Harris is not too far away, but this is one stat area where actually you kind of wonder, well, hang on, what's happening here? But Najee Harris will often rush the first 2 of the downs, and then Jaylen Warren is the one that gets the first down. Yards per attempt, that's interesting as well. It's interesting to see Justin Fields with a 5.3. Najee Harris is way down this list in at 23. Now, admittedly, this comes down to the line that he runs behind. And Christian McCaffrey runs behind a better line. But Jaylen Warren runs behind the same line that Najee did last year. And he had a 5.3. But I argued a lot last year on our channel that Jaylen Warren is more suited to the Steelers offensive line of last year versus Najee Harris because of the way that he runs the rock. This year, though, with the bully ball offense that the Steelers looked to have built through the draft, perhaps it might be a different scenario. But then you've got to think, what are the holes going to be like for Jaylen Warren as well? James Conner getting 5 yards, though, on what was a very average Arizona line, kind of demonstrates either how poor the line was or the struggles that Najee had earlier on in the season. If you look at yards per game, this is another area where Najee falls back. Now, Najee is sharing the rock. Najee is running behind a poor O-line. But Najee doesn't really break deep runs of like 30, 40 yards plus. It's just not something that he does. And so you kind of got to factor that in because the Steelers do have 2 running backs. The Steelers are a multifaceted running back core. The Steelers will need both gentlemen to get above 900 yards this season for them to really like push while they get adjusted with a Russell Wilson as an aging quarterback or getting Justin Fields comfortable not having to do everything and therefore throwing interceptions. So it is kind of an interesting prospect when you go to the contract. Now, when I'm talking a good deal for the Steelers at $6 million salary and guaranteeing most of that, plus incentives on top. Realistically, it might cost them more like $7 plus $1 million on top. But I like that better than signing Najee on 6.7 on a base effectively, you'd say 1 year option. To me, that makes a lot more sense for the Pittsburgh Steelers to make that decision now because they can lock in a running back without having to pay top guys. They don't really need to invest another top spot in it, and they can get the running core they have behind their line this year and then having the same running back core next year while they find another bloke. Now, they did get the bloke undrafted. They got the bloke out of Georgia, so that's where it could be interesting. But if you ask me going back to the 5th year option, whether I think it is worthy or makes sense for Steelers to pay Najee the 6-year option, I don't think it does because there's nothing in benefit to the Steelers here. There's no benefit to the Steelers picking up that option now after this year when Najee, will continue. If he has a great year, he'll be more expensive. That makes absolutely no sense. You've invested in the line now. Don't pick up the option. Extend him now. If you believe that he's going to perform well across this O-line, then you do sign him on a 2 or 3 year deal. 3-year deal, after that, he's probably not a Steeler anymore. 2-year deal, you might be setting yourselves up for another decision. But by then you can be looking at, well, hey, has Fields turned out into anything? Have we drafted a rookie quarterback in the draft? Is this the end that's we need Najee sitting behind an aging Russ if they choose not to continue with Fields? Najee could be a real key, pillar of, continuity and a real pillar of almost it's like sustainability in the offense if you do sign him. But that's not going to happen on a 5th-year option. So if you ask me, should they still pick up Najee's 5th-year option? Absolutely not. I think that makes absolutely zero sense, particularly when you see some of the contracts being handed out now across the league, but the running back position consistently being devalued. But do I think they should extend Najee Harris? 100%. And accepting a 5th-year option is not an extension. Extending him requires a multi-year deal, and you decline in the 5th-year option. But you let me know in the comments section. Do you think the Steelers should just pick up the 5th-year option? Let's see what Najee can do over the next two seasons. Or do you believe it's better just extend him, keep him till he's here, till he's 28, 29, and then we can reassess with them? You let me know in the comments. Hope you enjoyed the show. As always, go Steelers.